Hey, welcome back. Today we've got another little interesting Remington firearm today. This is a Remington model 513S, specifically the 513SA, which was a really neat, interesting 22 bolt action rifle from Remington, made during what I consider anyway to be the golden years of Remington production. This particular gun was made in December of 1948. A little bit about Remington, of course, they've been around since the very early 1800s, but the Remington family themselves didn't have anything to do with Remington or didn't have any controlling part of Remington after 1888. They'd actually sold the company in 1888 to the biggest wholesaler and firearms dealer in the United States at that time, Hartley and Graham out of New York. And they continued to produce guns up until the Great Depression hit, and they ended up selling it to a company called DuPont. Of course, DuPont was known for their innovation in explosive and smokeless powder and things of that nature, and that really began what I consider to be the golden years of firearm production for Remington, and they've maintained that into the well into into the 90s even, some 60 plus years. Then, of course, Remington got involved with various capital groups and the whole Freedom Group and all that stuff, and then the demise of Remington, which is a topic for another day. But let's talk a little bit about how this gun came to be. We talk about American gun designers. Obviously, John Browning is probably the name that everybody knows, but Remington had some good players too, and including they did work with John Browning quite a bit, including on the what became known as the Auto 5 shotgun, and then Remington produced it as a Model 11. But in the Remington stable, they had John Peterson. We've already talked about him, but probably their most prolific designer was a man by the name of Crawford Loomis, C.C. Loomis. And he held several of the patents that made this gun. So what was going on in the 20s and 30s was a big explosion across the industry of boys' rifles, bolt-action 22 rifles designed for young men and used to shoot and hunt and as part of a way of life. And everybody played. Winchester had a whole line of guns, the Model 60, the Model 69, all of these guns. Savage and Stevens, prior to their acquisition by Savage, had a whole line of them, and H&R and even smaller firms like Quackenbush and a bunch of other ones had these little 22 rifles, and Remington did as well. They had the Model 31, they had the Model 41, they had all of these as guns, but they were getting a little costly to produce, and they weren't being as competitive with the Stevens line and some of the lower price even Winchester models. So Crawford Loomis developed a receiver, which is this receiver here, which formed the basis of the entire 500 series of bolt-action rifles, the 510, 511, 512, and 513 series, and later was even used with the Model 550 semi-automatic rifle. So a lot of the patents here, patent numbers here are Crawford C. Loomis, and he was one of the most prolific designers for Remington, and which was somewhat unusual at the time. He stayed with Remington, I believe, his entire career. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a true statement. But so it's kind of unusual for that to happen. So what Winchester was trying to do, what Remington was trying to do is compete with Winchester with their introduction of the Model 75 rifle. So the Model 75 Winchester was kind of a less expensive version of their Model 52 target gun. So they produced a sporter version of that as well, the Winchester 75 Sporter. So in 1941, Remington developed the 513. So, and one of the interesting about Remington, one of the fun facts is, in that period of firearm development for Remington, every gun had a model name as well, and they all ended with Master. So, you had the 510, the single shot version of this, which was called the Target Master, just a single shot light barrel gun. The 511, same gun with a box magazine, called the Score Master. The 512 was the Sport Master, had the tube mag. And then the 513 was the Matchmaster, both in the 513T, the target gun, and the 513S. And these are all marked on the top of the barrel with that name on it. So this one here obviously is the Matchmaster, and here are those patent numbers that are assigned to Crawford Loomis. So the sporter version of this gun was designed specifically to compete with the Winchester 75 sporter, and they did some smart things. The Winchester, for example, has a 24-inch barrel. This barrel is 27 inches long, same as the 513T. And many of the guys in that time period, we're talking 40s and even into the 50s and 60s, my dad among them, equated that longer barrel length with either more velocity or more accuracy. It's not necessarily ballistically true, especially in 22 long rifle, but it was kind of a selling point. Hey, our barrel's 27 inches long, so you can reach out further with the 513, whether it's true or not. These guns were not, well, I say they weren't. Remington would do it on order, but these guns are not drilled and tapped for scope on top. They are drilled on the side of the receiver here for the receiver sight, and they could be so equipped from the factory, which was the 513 SP. The SA, this model, had this sporting rear sight. This is a flat top marble sporting rear sight, which was standard from the factory. Notice the wood is not grooved for the receiver sight. It would be if the gun was factory installed, the receiver sight. Otherwise, they came just like this. So these guns were relatively low production. The total production in the 513T and 513S model combined is right around 137,000 units, which sounds like a lot of guns, but the 510, the little single shot, 510 single shot, there was over 500,000 of those rifles produced. So this is a fairly low production. And unlike the 510, 5 and 511, these guns are actually serialized. They're not serialized on the receiver. They are serialized on the underside of the barrel here in front of the forend. A lot of folks miss that when they're looking at the gun, but they are serialized there. That said, that's not how you date a Remington. The reason we know that this gun's December 48 is on the left side of the barrel. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to focus on that, but on the left side of the barrel, just ahead of the receiver, there's some letter stampings. And part of that is a month and date code. So this is XTT right here in this stamping. And online you can find that chart. Remington Society, again, I strongly recommend you, if you're interested in Remington firearms, I strongly recommend you join that organization. I am. I'm a member of it, have been for many, many years. But XTT will translate to December of 1948. Now that's worthwhile on a gun that's not routinely changed barrels, but on an 870 or 1100 or something like that, it can be a little bit more problematic if the owners change the barrel out. So the 513T, back to this model, the 513T had a heavier profile 27-inch barrel and a heavier wood stock designed for target use. And about 10,000 513T models were ordered by the government for use in military training and for ROTC. And those guns differ in that they did not have this beautiful rust blue finish that the commercial gun did. They had a phosphate or parkerized finish, and they would be U.S. property stamped. So that would be, of all the 500 series, that U.S. property 513T is the rarest, but that's followed by the 513S. Only about 14,000 of these were produced. So relatively low number production on this gun. They're very well made. I mean, the action is basically the same throughout the series. You have a bolt with dual extractors, a fixed blade ejector. You have a red cocking indicator that comes out the back when the bolt is cocked. This is cut checkering on walnut stock. You have a nice steel butt plate here. So it's a well done gun. And this particular unit, this particular rifle right here, the bore is mirror on. It's just been well cared for, which is unusual in a boys rifle, but although it's a member of the boys rifle series, if you will, from Remington, this was designed as a little bit more upscale, I guess. So, and it was billed in advertising as a man-sized rifle, so they tried to differentiate this model from the 510, 511, and 512. So it's not unusual to see these in a better cared for condition than the 510. So what do we look for when we evaluate the gun? Well, just like any other collectible firearm, we're going to look at originality, we're going to look at scarcity, and we're going to look at condition. So we've already talked about scarcity. The number one thing that gets done with these is the drill and tap. This one has not been. Some people that are buying these strictly for shooters don't much care as long as it's drill and tap correctly, but collectors do care. The very latest production of these, as well as the 513T, were grooved from the factory for tip-off scope mounts. That is extremely uncommon. Only in the late 50s production. These guns ended in about 56. So only the very latest, the 513T continued a little bit beyond that, but only the very latest production will have the factory grooves. You can groove them aftermarket. A good gunsmith with the correct milling machine can mill that for grooves, and that was done. The very latest of them were actually produced with grooves, so those are rare. We're going to look for any alteration to the bluing, right? So, and we've discussed it before, the difference between rust blue and polished salt blue. And with experience, you can tell as soon as you see the rifle how the gun was finished. We always look, and even under magnification, we'll look at this small lettering here, the registered U.S. Patent Office, the patent markings here. These marks are applied after the metal is prepped. So it's almost impossible to polish this, to re-blue it, after the markings are applied without altering the marking. There'll be a little bit, I don't care how careful you are, there's going to be a little fading of some of this lettering. So looking at it under magnification is a pretty clear indication as to whether it's been polished or not. So that's original. So condition, this gun here is in above average condition. So I mean, it's a great find. We were happy to pick it up. We buy collections and estates and whatnot fairly regularly, and we always look for things like this. You wouldn't think a 22 bolt action would be that popular of an item, but it really is. It may have to be a nationwide market for it to get what, in order for it to be fully appreciated, but we certainly would do that. So, interesting gun, the Remington 513 Sporter 513S-A from December of 1948. Just another cool gun from what I consider Remington's golden age of firearms manufacture, from 1930 to about 1960, in that line. So hopefully we'll be able to bring you some more as we get them and discuss more of this cool stuff. If you have any thoughts about this, or if there's any models you want to talk about, drop them in the comments. If we can get a hold of one, either out of my personal collection, or if we have one, or if I can beg, borrow, or steal one, we'll do it. And please make sure to subscribe, like the content. Let us know you're watching, and what you think of the series. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.